Jesse is going to be joining us, and we are going to jam on burnout, how you can notice and tell that you might be in it or heading towards it. And then once you are in it and you notice that you're in it, what to do about it. And then finally, what is it like coming out of it? Because you don't just kind of snap out of it and then all the magic happens.
Welcome to The Mandate, a show featuring intimate conversations about men's mental health, masculinity, and identity. We bring you stories to inspire you, experts to guide you, and the tools you need to become the man you truly want to be. It's time to sit back, relax, and open up. Live from the Mandate Studio in Austin, Texas, here's your host, Adam Hoffman.
So with that, Jesse, welcome, man. Thanks for hanging out.
Good. How's it going, man?
I'm good. I like the background. It's nice and tranquil. You got the plants back there.
Yeah.
Doesn't feel like you're in the middle of burnout right now.
I'm not in the middle of burnout at all.
Good stuff. Well, who the heck are you besides my friend and a guy that I worked with for a little bit?
Name is Jesse Frye. I am the founder of the Business Blueprint, as well as the host of my new podcast, The Business Survival Show, where I bring on entrepreneurs to talk about their stories and talk about, the challenges they face and how they're overcoming those challenges. And right now with the pandemic, there are a lot of small businesses struggling. It's just a way for me to give back to the small businesses that are struggling, and for those that aren't, right, just to tell their stories.
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I are so passionate about some of the same things, one of which being the power of stories and just how sharing what you're up to and what other people are up to creates a space for others to be like, oh, yeah, okay, I'm not alone. Like, other people are feeling this, and it's gonna be okay. It might not feel like that every day, but in this moment, while I'm listening to this person's story, I can see myself there. Maybe they figured it out. Maybe they haven't, and that gives me, a little bit more confidence to go and explore, which is the whole reason that I made this show in the first place too. So
yeah, cool. Looking forward to it.
Let's get into it, man. Let's start off with your story. Like, tell us a little bit more. Obviously we'll get to burnout and talk about all that kind of stuff, but since this is a show about men's mental health and our identities, how are you doing? How have you been kind of keeping yourself up mentally? Or maybe you haven't and you've been struggling a little bit, but what can you share with us about your personal journey?
Yeah, I mean, men's mental health, as you and I have talked many times, can be a challenge due to a variety of different reasons. I think for me right now, I'm actually probably in the best place that I've been in a really, really long time. A lot of that is due to some recent choices that I've made, such as leaving a six-figure salary job to go and do something I've always been passionate about and talking about. And wanting to do for years, and just haven't taken that leap to do it. A person in my life, that I'm currently with, having a great relationship with somebody that sees you and understands you is hugely important. I certainly have my challenges right now, and I'm trying not to allow those kind of things impact me too much. But grew up, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, served in the U.S. Coast Guard, sitting in a ship for 6 months, 7 months at a time, tin can, as they say, can definitely have its challenges mentally on you. I've kind of had my ups and downs. I'm divorced. So, we've had conversations about that. That brings a whole nother level of mental challenges and kind of making you make decisions in your life that you may not normally want to, but you do out of necessity sometimes. So I don't know if that helps, if that gives you a glimpse into me.
Yeah, well, I think it's just, I want to try to make everybody feel as human as possible. Not like, we're two guys sitting here and we've got it all figured out and we just, live this blissful life. Everything's all peaches, and I don't know where I was going with that, but everything's all perfect and it's not. Even when things are going well, things can sneak up on you, and there's never really an opportunity to just be like, oh yeah, okay, great. I totally have this. I feel like, one of the things that I was talking to another friend about recently was this concept that my therapist gave to me the monsters on the bus. And she would explain it as like, imagine you're driving a school bus, and like the school bus is full of whatever it is for you, kids, important people, like whatever you care about. But really, it's like your life back there. So you're driving this bus, and if you take your eye off the road, like it's a really treacherous road. And one false move could, like, well, you're at least going off the road, right? And so the idea is that you've got all these monsters back here, that the voices in your head, those negative voices that are like, some days they're throwing poop at you, they're calling you names, whatever it is. And if you look back at them, you take your eye off the road, you're at least going into the shoulder, hopefully no farther than that. But this idea that like we're constantly under threat, either from the voices in our head or, negative beliefs around us or whatever it is that, cause us to take our eyes off the road. And it's like, yeah, those voices are always going to be there. They're never just not going to go away.
Yeah.
And
they definitely come from different directions too, right? It's not like you think they're coming from like one direction all the time, but man, they come from you in every direction.
Yes. All right. Well, let's jump into burnout here. So I was doing a little bit of research ahead of time, which was a new thing for me going into these sessions. So I've kind of just been winging it, to be totally honest. A couple things that I found out about burnout that I thought were really interesting in this HBR article that just has a wealth of information. And there's a ton of stuff out there about it, but some highlights for me was, one, burnout's recognized by the World Health Organization. I forget exactly when, but it is recognized as an occupational phenomenon, like a hazard. So it's not considered, something like anxiety or depression that's you get burnout per se, but like burnout happens through your work environment. There's a lot of like, yes, there's self-care and stuff that you can do and to pay attention to along the way, which we'll talk about as well. But the majority of it is on the workplace. And some stats that also jumped out at me was Stanford did a research study. And they calculated that about $190 billion are spent in healthcare annually because of burnout, because of workplace-related stress. Workplace-related stress on its own is $500 billion of the healthcare expenditure each year, and they estimate that 550 million workdays are lost because of workplace stress. So like, this isn't just something that like happens to us two guys. Like, it's literally happening to everybody. I think somewhere else I saw the final one that I'll throw out is 77% of people, I think this survey happened in 2019, said that they've experienced burnout at some point in time in that year, which is just absolutely insane. And that's not even taking into account what we're all sitting in right now. So that being said, when did you first experience burnout?
That's a good question. I think if I go back throughout my career, probably my first time I've ever experienced burnout was while I was in the military. Because you're working 24 hours a day, whether you think you are, but you're on a ship. If you're in the Navy, you're on a Navy ship for 12 months out of the time. But in the Coast Guard, we were at sea for 6 months out of the year. And while you're at sea, you're working all the time. And even when you're not working, you're working. And so I didn't really realize it until probably at about year 3, when I was just completely just not happy. And that's where you really start thinking, do I want to re-enlist? And they gave me like a $25,000 enlistment bonus if I wanted to take it. And I did not take it. I got out because I'm like, I can't keep doing this, right? So then I probably went through my career for a couple years, didn't experience it, but it was probably whenever I started, when I got married, I had a mortgage, started piling all those responsibilities on top of me, and I worked for General Electric for about 7 years, and it was probably into, I don't know, maybe month or year 4 or 5 when I was traveling all the time, working all the time. And, one of the things I'm not unique, but my hobby is to work. Like, I actually enjoy working, but I enjoy working on things that I enjoy. But in the case of when you're traveling all the time, coming home, missing, your kids' first steps, those kind of things, that's probably where the stress really started piling up on me. And I started noticing physical changes. I was having headaches all the time. That was probably a dark time in my life too, and definitely had an impact on my marriage at the time.
Yeah, I know that we've talked about that a little bit. We might have to have a follow-on show about
Sure.
that whole experience. But so headaches you mentioned. What else? Like, what did it feel like when you were in the thick of it?
I mean, I think it's a form of depression, right? I mean, I'm not a psychologist, but I would imagine it's a form of depression. I put on weight. You start, your habits start waning. You don't go to the gym. You don't stay physically fit. You stop. You socially isolate yourself. You don't surround yourself by people. So I think it's very similar to others, burnout in your relationship or burnout in a variety of different things, right? Your body starts changing, your mind starts changing, and then I think too, you probably start making excuses for why work sucks. I get irritable, and maybe you've seen it whenever we work together, right? There was probably times where I got burnt out. I was really burnt out in my last role, and I think it comes where you start having bad relationships with people at work. You have your group of people that you probably stay real close with, but even I think at times you and I probably butted heads a few times, right? Just because there was a lot of stress, and I think many of us were experiencing that stress, and probably a lot of us were burnt out because of just the changes in what was happening. So I think your relationships at work start changing. Your relationships at home start changing. I probably was more irritable. And so I think there's a variety of reasons and a variety of symptoms, but I think irritability, you start socially isolating, you become negative because you don't want to really be there, right? You become negative. So those are the initial thoughts that come up in my mind.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned other people and the role that they could play in this. And what I think about a lot is how we all can end up being kind of complicit in it and support it by like rationalizing it, for example, where it's like, yeah, well, hey man, it's hard for everybody. Like it just really sucks right now. Like those types of conversations where there were times for sure when I either experienced it directly with you while we were working together, or I saw it through somebody else, or somebody else told me about it. And in that moment, like I didn't know what to go and do. And then I feel bad about it, and I feel guilty about it, and that just like puts me off in my own little corner of pain and suffering, that like we love to go to as men, because we don't ask for help, and we got to grind it out, and we got to figure it out, and we got to support everybody, and the weight of the world's on our shoulders and all that bullshit. And then boom, in fact it was like all I wanted to say to you was like, hey man, you're kind of being an asshole, and I know that this isn't you. Like what the hell's going on? Like let's talk about this. Right. And that's you in the thick of it, or you, the greater you in the thick of it. What I've been trying to pay attention to a lot more is, what are some of those early signs? I think you called out a lot of good ones. One for me in particular that feels true is when I start to deprioritize myself, right? When it's like, oh, you know what? Yeah, okay, I can skip this morning's workout or meditation or journaling, whatever it is that I'm doing in the morning for this, because I feel like I have to. And if I just do this one thing, then like it's going to make it better. So then I start making those excuses for, what I need to do, and start making those, additional sacrifices that aren't really there. And then it definitely, I think another one for me that's like an early warning sign is like language. Do you start talking about things more negatively? Do you start to have more negative conversations with the people that are around you? It looks like we may have lost. Oh, you're back. All right, you good?
I'm back.
Okay,
my power
cool.
was low, and my headphones weren't reconnecting. It's all the challenges you face when you're doing stuff over your phone.
Yes, gosh, I think I forgot to give you that pro tip ahead of time, just plug in your phone.
Yeah.
I'll put that on my to-do list. So anyways, I was just kind of going down, talking about language and how our language starts to shift. And I think that's where you called out your relationship with other people, where you just feel more irritable. What do you think makes it, I feel like when we're in it, we can probably point to those things. We're better at pointing to it in other people, but what do you think it is about, um, obviously generally, but since we're on the mandate, about being a guy that makes it harder to confront those things early on?
Oh man, I think there's so many levels to that, right? I think a lot of it is the social element of like what men are expected to be. We're supposed to, from the early childhood, we're told to suck it up when we fall down, right? Boys can't cry, all those things. So I think it's ingrained in us. So then what happens is it prevents us from actually, vocalizing how we're feeling and being honest. But I think the other aspect of it is we're kind of told, I think there's like a generation kind of shift depending on which generation you come from. But I was raised by baby boomers, and it was like the man had to have the job and had to take care of the family. And I think then what happens is you get into your job and you think it's a responsibility for me to be there. So then, like, if you say something, then like you're showing weakness. So if I didn't trust you, I could be honest with you because I trusted you, but there's some people that you work with and work for that you can't be honest with them because you don't know truly if they're being 100% honest with you. And I've worked for those people where I was afraid to literally tell them anything about how I was feeling about my job because I was like, if I showed that weakness and showed vulnerability, they would see it as a weakness and be like, we got to get rid of this guy, So I think that there's a lot of elements to it. It's like the need to provide, right? You have to have that income. So if you know you have to provide, and then you are afraid to tell the person that you work for or other people in your organization, it creates a lot of issues, right? So I think we kind of carry that on our shoulders. And I'm sure a lot of those are the same, both genders. I'm sure women face a lot of the same things, right? There's probably a different whole nother level of issues. But I think for men, we have this expectation that, we're just suck it up, Jesse. Like be a man and do your, like, you hear that, be a man, right? And do your job. And I think depending on your relationship with your partner, you don't want to let them down. There's so many, there's so many dichotomies to that.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing for me is that when you're in it, you're not present to any of that stuff, right? Like you're not thinking about that in the middle of it, where it's like, why am I still here? Oh, right, it's because I've got these, cultural expectations or societal norms that suggest that like it's just a job. Like, don't get so stressed out about it. Don't take it so seriously. Like, whatever. Like, get it done, and then go and live your life. And it's like, nope. It's kind of not like that because it's not like we're showing up to a factory.
Right.
And we're just, we're pulling the press, and the machine does the thing, and I work my 8 hours, I punch in, I punch out, and I go home. Right. Like, for so many people now, work is where they derive meaning, whether you're a guy or otherwise. And it's like because it's more than that, and you're in it and you're committed to it, it's hard. And I think that's why I appreciate the people that are pointing out, who saying things like, it's not you. Like, you can't go do more yoga. You can't go do more meditation. You can't hire a therapist and a coach to make the burnout less or change or anything. Like, yeah, you can make it a little bit better, but really the only way to get out of burnout, I think, is to get out of the situation. So before we jump into like that, navigating that whole ball of thorns, quick thing for anybody who's watching live. If you've got questions, comments, links, anything that you want to share, feel free to drop into the chat. We love taking questions and sharing comments. Shout out to Corey J23. That's my wife. She is acknowledging that we're chatting here, and I know that she has definitely felt some burnout. And I see, let's see, Mike's here. What's up, Mike? I think Cannon is probably listening. I think I might have seen another buddy, Corey. So anyways, if you're here, say hello, ask a question. If not, just keep listening. So now we've got some signs for like how to notice that maybe you're in it. We acknowledge that burnout isn't necessarily all your fault. before we jump into like quitting your job and, you know, making that leap, what are some things that you found that could help you while you're in the middle of it? Because you might not be able to make a change, you know, just in an instant.
Yeah, I mean, I took vacation, so and I have had a pattern in the past, which I try not to, and I really I try not to, but I have, again, I love working sometimes, a lot of times, but I had a pattern in the past of taking vacation, but not truly taking vacation, not disconnecting from work. And I took an amazing trip to Colorado and Utah, and we went to Moab and hiked to one of the arches. It was a Corona arch, by the way. I mean, it was kind of it was kind of fun, but, apparently it was the most popular arch to hike in 2020. Go figure.
Surprise.
But
Took over Delicate Arch, which is another great hike.
I know it is. So I think that trip, by disconnecting, literally not checking in to work, not communicating with anybody at work during that time, and really just kind of like, we didn't even plan our trip that much. We didn't have any hotels booked. We just went as we went, and took us outside of our comfort zone. And I think that allowed us to mentally decompress a little bit. Plus, I was going to say, you know, I think during the pandemic, it's added a whole nother level of like reasons why we don't actually say anything, because, like, you know, people are losing their jobs left and right. And in our particular situation, a lot of people lost their job. And so I was like, you know, we had survivor's guilt, and we were the few left behind. So it's like, you don't want to say anything. So I think going back to that, I think taking time off, I think communicating, if you have a partner, you know, communicating with that person and just telling them how you feel. And also get a therapist, right? Therapy can be so helpful. Hiring a life coach or another type of coach to help you work through those things. Or just having a friend that listens. Like you and I, we talked a lot. And you know, even after you left and I left shortly behind you, you know, you and I had conversations, and having somebody to just tell them how you feel, and getting a different perspective sometimes is important. So it's not just about like, I'm going to quit my job. It's like, is it salvageable, right? Like really try to rationalize, am I being unreasonable? So it's asking yourself a lot of questions.
Yeah. I'll point out a couple of things here. One, just to acknowledge that we're incredibly fortunate to be able to talk about things like seeing a therapist, getting a coach, taking a vacation. That isn't always an option, right? Which is why
Yeah.
I love that you pointed out having a really close friend, and that's something that, you know, Don Bradley, one of our earlier guests, talked about too, is having that friend or friends who they know and you know you've agreed that we can go to each other when stuff's hard and talk about it. And it's not going to be weird, and we're not going to feel guilty that we're putting burden on each other. And so just creating that space with somebody as your check-in, I really, really love that idea. I think some stuff that came up for me is setting boundaries, which is hard when you're in the middle of it, right? Because what I did was I just kept justifying it. Like, okay, if I can just get through this week, it's going to be a long week, but I'll get the work done. You know, next week, oh God, next week looks so good. And then guess what? Next week looked just the same, if not worse, once I got through it. And so being able to block time, depending on what organization you're in or how that works, to set those boundaries so that people can't book meetings with you, so that you've got time for you, so that you're not starting, you know, at 7 and going till 7 plus in the evenings. Like, we're not necessarily, we're getting paid for performance if we're talking salary jobs here, right? And so like, we're not getting paid by the hour if that's the case. And so when we need to, we have to optimize for that. And like, I know for myself, I'm not at my best, but when I'm in the middle of it, it's so hard to go and do for the reasons that you talked about.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, Corey, great point. Those boundaries got so blurred at the beginning of COVID, for all the people that started working from home for the first time, because there was no off switch. It was like, well, I don't have to drive, which was maybe downtime. I don't have to be home to go and do the thing. I'm just always at home. And I know that I noticed a massive uptick in the amount of hours that people were working simply because the commute went away.
Yeah.
and their responsibilities were at home.
Yeah. I've worked almost my entire career remotely, with exception to a couple years when I really knew I needed mentorship. But I think people that work from home work more. I mean, there's no like water cooler talk. You go to your refrigerator. You don't have to go down to the company kitchen. You don't have to typically go out to lunch. So I think burnout is a lot more frequent, I think, in people that work from home than for people that are actually in an office. Not saying that people in an office don't go through that, but I think if you were to look at remote work, and now through where more and more people are, I'm sure burnout is going to be pretty common here in about another 3 to 6 months. You're going to start to see a lot of people struggling.
Oh, I mean, yeah, we're already in it.
Yeah.
That's for sure. I think it's gonna come out where people will start saying like that they're just in it. I mean, in some cases, probably like experiencing some form of trauma, and well, I'm not an expert on that by any means, but I think that we'll start to see more of that. So let's talk next about. So you've tried some of these things. You've gone down the path of like you've talked to a friend. That friend is honest with you, and they're like, "Hey, Jesse, this sounds like a really shitty situation. Like, you need to get yourself out of it." You've tried, whatever your self-care looks like, whether it's a vacation, staycation, just taking time off. You've tried, all the, best practice mental health stuff, meditating, journaling, breathing exercises, exercising, you're watching your sleep, like your diet's on point, and you still feel like this, and you're like, I can't get out.
Yeah.
I know that I try to pay attention as I get older to like these patterns like you were alluding to earlier. And when you were talking about taking your vacation, tell us a little bit about what it was those final couple of weeks were like for you before you decided to leave.
Oh, I think that I went through various different stages, right? So there was the stage of, um, trying to salvage relationships in the organization that I had felt maybe I had burnt, and to like really come back and maybe shift my mindset. A lot of people struggle with shifting mindset, but I was really paying attention to the mindset and trying to figure out how I shift that. It wasn't until Lindsay and I were having a conversation, and she said, when you're not happy, is this worth it, right? And that's like, so we took some time. We went down to the beach for about 5 days, came back. I was rejuvenated, but then that didn't last for very long, right? It was kind of like that, feel good, and then all of a sudden it comes back. And then we went on a longer vacation, right? Fortunately, I was able to do that, and that was over maybe a 2 or 3 month period. We went on a longer vacation, and then this time I like really disconnected, and came back. I felt rejuvenated again, but then I started realizing like it didn't matter. It didn't matter how often I did that. I couldn't keep taking vacations to feel good. It's like people take drugs to feel good, right? I mean, vacation was becoming my drug to feel good, and it just wasn't mentally working anymore. And so I made that decision to finally say, and I had conversations with people in HR. I think a lot of times, people are fearful of HR and HR departments. Some are good, some aren't so good. There's some organizations that do really well in supporting their employees. In our case, we had a great, person that was great. She listened, and gave me ideas and strategies to kind of overcome that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it didn't work out for me, right? Because I was mentally, I just wasn't committed anymore. And I think that's the question you have to ask yourself is, can you change your mindset and be committed? Because the work's not going away, right? The work is going to always be there, and it's going to be, it's not going to change much. So I saw it progressively changing, but it was definitely, it was probably about a few months. And then finally it was like, I can't mentally do this anymore.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing all that. I know that like it's recent, and so it's not always easy to come back to that. Yeah, while you were sharing that part of your story, it felt almost identical to what I was experiencing. Although I think I maybe took it one step further. And so what I noticed was that I'd kind of get to my breaking point where there's this GIF that I love. Just this guy just like starts flipping stuff off this table. That I probably sent it to you many times. But so that's just what I feel like in that moment. And then when other people notice it, and it's great when your manager notices and they're like, "Hey, why don't you take a couple days off?" And you're like, "Okay, I was thinking that I just couldn't. It was against the rules to take time off right now, but like, okay, I'll take some days off." And so what happened for me was that it was take a long weekend, take Friday off. And that got me like another month. And then burned out again. And then I took 4 days off. And then that got me like 3 weeks. And then I took 5 days off and it got me like 2 weeks. And then I took a week off and it got me like 3 days. Right. And those 3 days before like I realized that I had to make a change and had to make some hard choices, which ultimately ended up being very easy choices. In hindsight, the better choices was I was walking up the stairs one morning and I sat down and I just started crying. Tears were just streaming down my face. And I was like, I didn't even know this was here. But like my body was telling me, sit down, pay attention. Something is not right. And I was about to go and get on a call with somebody who like I generally like hanging out with. It wasn't something that I was going to the call itself I was dreading. It was just everything else. Yeah. And have a great partner and sat down and talked to Corey, and then I went up and got on the video call, my eyes all red and tissue sitting next to me. It was just like, I'm not okay. They're like, "Oh my God, Adam, like I didn't know that it was this bad. Let's talk about what that means." And so my goal is that it doesn't have to get that bad for people, that they can pay attention to it ahead of time so that they can make those decisions while they're not under that much stress,
Yeah. Well, it was interesting too. During that time, I looked for other jobs, right? But and I had job interviews, but I just couldn't mentally. I'm just replacing one change for another, right? And I just did not have the passion for the interviews. I probably did not come across as being, somebody that they wanted to hire. And I think that's another sign too. It's like we have to be able to like really evaluate. Are we making? I forget the exact words I used to somebody, but somebody was actually like looking for one of our team members was actually looking to make a change, and I said, don't leave because you're wanting to replace. Actually, it was another friend of ours in a different role, but I told that person, don't change simply to replace the problem that you currently have, because you're likely going to carry that problem into the next role, because you're not changing the emotional baggage that you're carrying. It's like just like a relationship, right? Like people go in the relationship after relationship after relationship, and they all are always the same, right? Because like you're not changing something in yourself on being able to identify when there's problems. So you carry this baggage from place to place, just like you do in relationships. You go from job to job and you carry the same baggage, and your work ethic isn't changed. Your ability to time manage hasn't changed. Your ability to identify red flags in yourself, right? You ignore the red flags of like picking a bad employer, right? Just like ignoring the red flags in a bad relationship. And so I think that we have to do a better job as men of not being afraid to question and not being afraid to say to ourselves, what do I need to fix in me? Right? Like, so not like now I have zero interest whatsoever of taking a full-time job right now. Like whether I need it or not, like I've got this coaching practice. I'm trying to move this forward. And even if I get to the point where I'm like, man, my coaching clients, my numbers are not there and I can't sustain financially, I'm not taking a full-time job because mentally I am not ready Just like, you know, going into a relationship, sometimes you're not ready for that relationship. And I'm not ready for that work relationship. And I can't give a company my full energy, but you know, the idea of dabbling into new things, challenging myself, being creative energizes me. And I think that's what will prevent burnout, is doing things that you're passionate about, and being able to balance, you know, your life and taking that jog in the middle of the afternoon or going to dinner with your partner when you can finally do that again. But just some additional thoughts.
Yeah, so I definitely want to come back to that because it's kind of related to what Slice of Pie shared with us down below about when your job is also your hobby and your passion. And I'll push back on what you just said here shortly, but
Yeah.
we'll keep us on this journey. So we're aware that we're in the middle of burnout. We've seen these signs. It feels like crap. Something has to change. It's gotten so bad. How did you go about making that? Since you've done it multiple times, how have you gone about making that decision to make a change when it feels impossible?
Well, I mean, I see this change as being no different than the other changes I made in my life. I would say I was divorced going on 5 years ago. And that decision was like the toughest decision I've ever made in my life, right? And then I think as you get better at identifying change and that there's a need for change and then having the courage to make it, it becomes easier to make change, right? And it was actually, for me personally, the big fear is, you know, you don't have money, right? Like if I quit my job and I don't want to go to another full-time job, what are my options, right? So it was a video that I watched about the illusion of money was the video. And it was about this mindset of like, we have this illusion that we need money. And I don't necessarily think I had an illusion that I needed it, but I had an illusion that you need it to sustain. And whenever I watched that, there was things that I didn't point out. And fortunately, my partner, she's a social worker, so she's really good at asking questions and pointing things out. She pointed out some things that were in there that made me question. And I came to this realization of like, I don't need this, right? I don't need this. It's not good for me. I'm not bringing my best self to work anymore. I could see that in the conversations I was having with people. I'm like, I can't believe I'm saying these things to these people. Like, and people like me become toxic. When you're burnt out, you become toxic. There are people that shut down, and then there are people that you're like, I don't really care about being here anymore. And then like, you just like, you become the a-hole and like, you'll say anything. And I wasn't terrible. I was trying to be professional, but there are people that you have maybe a little bit more trust with that you say things. But I was realizing, man, Jesse, you're not this person. You can't be this person. So it was a lot of self-awareness of realizing I can't be that person. But it was also having very open and honest dialogue with Lindsay and just being truthful with myself. And then being truthful with HR and being truthful with my direct manager and just saying, this is my next step. And I have to make this choice because it's better for me and it's going to be ultimately better for you too.
Yeah, I mean, you and I have similar stories once again, where we both left without any idea of what was next. It was just like, it's not this. And I feel like most of the people out there, whether, you know, they're listening to this or they're just out there in general, are at that place where, yeah, they don't have a clue. Maybe they've tried to get a job, but it's not working and they're wondering why. And, you know, you pointed out some good things. It's like, well, don't just think because you're not in this environment that you're still not burnt out and toxic, you know, elsewhere where you go. Yeah. Like, this is going to show up in other parts of your life. Like, what helped you to have that courage, like you talked about, whereas maybe the mindset for other men could be like, oh, well, I'm weak if I have to quit because I can't grind my way through this. Whereas you're approaching it saying like, yeah, no, I had the courage to leave without you didn't say this, I'm saying this for you. You had the courage to leave without knowing what was next, knowing that you've got a family, you know, you've got kids to take care of, you've got a mortgage. I'm sure you have some other expenses. you can't go and take those vacations necessarily as often anymore, Jesse. Um,
But now
but
I
like,
have more vacation time.
right. Yeah. So you've got these sacrifices to make because you're giving up this job, this salary that comes with it. What helped you have that courage and that comfort to be like, I'm just going to go for it?
I think again, it comes back to the other decisions that I made. So I think the courage compounds just like fear compounds, right? So we build fear over time, and then we're more reluctant to actually make choices out of fear, right? And uncertainty. I think I had the opposite. I have been building courage to make really tough decisions, but it's also knowing that the person that has the most control of the situation is me. And if I make this choice, I was thinking to myself, if I make this choice, the only person that can basically I can blame if the output or the outcome after I leave this job because I'm burnt out, the only person I can blame is myself, right? I can't blame anybody else, and I have to be willing to take ownership of that. So I think the courage builds over time. So I think for the person that's never made a tough choice in their life and they're sitting there thinking I'm in a bad relationship, or I'm not happy in my marriage, or I'm not happy in my job, whatever that is, taking that first step and making that first change, that first pivotal change in your life, and saying no, or I know people that are dependent on parents. It's in their 30s, right? It's like, being willing to say no to people and being willing to say, like, you're making this change and it's going to be okay. Right. I think that's the biggest thing. It's going to be okay one way or the other. If my business does not thrive and I have to go drive for Uber or work at Home Depot or whatever, I'll do it. Right. Like, it will all work out. It's being able to say, like, what can I do? And what is like the minimum, right? And just being able to like not say, I can do this. So I think, and at the end of the day, I think too, the question is, you have to ask yourself and self-coach yourself, am I going to be happier by making this change? And I can tell you from the major changes that I've made in my life, I have always been happier when I've made those really critical changes in my life. Always been happier.
Yeah. And I don't know if you're a visualizer, but like, I'm a big visualizer. And so one thing that I got from a therapist was to go through this exercise that I'll attempt to just talk through right now. And so what she had me do was, first you got to like kind of get in touch with your feelings. And so, which is, maybe an uncomfortable thing for us guys. So I sat there and she's like, all right, we got to do like an initial calibration, right? Like, you don't just go start all willy-nilly, like you got to calibrate. And so you kind of go to two extremes. And so you sit down, you think about something that like really gets you excited. It brings you joy, you feel happy. Like, think of that thing and see how that feels in your body. So like for me, I usually feel those types of things, like it's like a lightness or energy in my chest. And then you do the opposite. You think about something that like makes you nervous, you don't like, it makes you feel uncomfortable. Think about where you feel that. So like for me, I feel that like in my stomach, it gets tight. And if I'm really nervous and anxious, like it's across my chest. So now that you've got those two things kind of calibrated, you then you visualize yourself in these two different scenarios. And so it's best like if you're literally sitting down. And so you just close your eyes, or if that's not your thing, you leave them open. But you just think about, okay, in your current situation, if you were in the current situation as it stands right now, a year from now, or any period of time, how does that feel? Where do you see that in your body? Does it put you in the good, nice, light, energetic camp? Or does it put you in the dark, uncomfortable, somebody just punched me in the gut camp? And then you think about what you think the non-working or the non-job scenario is. Maybe it is another job, but maybe it's just like not having a job. What does that feel like? That's a good indicator for what it's going to be like when you do go and you make that decision.
Yeah.
So for you go and you make this decision, most recently, like, hey, I'm done. I'm going to move on. What was that like?
I think for me, I'm excited, right? I'm excited because now I can craft the future that I want. But I think it also, other people see it. And I think I was hiking with Lindsay and we were talking about just like since things have changed, how have I been? And she said, I can tell like a huge difference in you, right? So I, you know, like I think to your point, your therapist was doing a lot of somatic therapy, you know, and I've done somatic therapy myself. And it's like, you know, I can feel that I don't have tension in my neck anymore. I don't have like tightness in my chest anymore physically. A lot of people carry stress in their neck, shoulders, and in their lower back. A lot of people have lumbar issues. So, you know, I go to the chiropractor regularly to get popped, snap, crackle, and pop. And that relieves a lot of stress, I think, personally, even if you don't believe in it, I believe in it. But I think being able to I sleep, I still sleep kind of crappy, but, I usually get 7 to 8 hours of sleep. Whereas at times I was up at 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning when that was going on. I was sleeping terrible. So whereas now I get better sleep. I wake up refreshed. I have, you know, more motivation to do things. So I think it's just, you feel it in your body, just like to your point. I feel it in my body, and I'm not worried. Like occasionally I get these moments of like fear that pop in my head, and I'm like, okay, like stop thinking that. Like it will be okay. Things are going to be okay. So there's moments that those, like you were saying earlier, like all the monsters, right? Occasionally monsters try to get back into your head, and I just basically, I'm like, it's going to be okay. And I'm just setting a timeline for myself to like work towards this business and make it happen. I'm not going to worry about it until then.
I think this is a good place too, where we can use some of that kind of masculinity programming that we've all got going for us, being like, hey man, you're a strong guy. You got this. You're going to figure it out. You always do. You land on your feet. It might be uncomfortable for a little bit. It also might be nice for a little bit. So enjoy that time while you've got it. I know for me, the first week afterwards was one of those just like, I'm going to do whatever I want sort of a thing. And that was great. Second week, I was miserable. I was just like, I felt so useless. I didn't know what I was doing. And so like expect to kind of go on this roller coaster when you're coming out of it, because you've been in a crappy situation for a while, and like you just got to come out of it. And I've talked to a number of people where, you know, some people it's been a couple weeks and they're back at it. Other people it's taken them months to fully I talked to somebody, you know, about a month ago who was like, it took me 12 months to fully come out of their most recent experience with burnout. Like it's a serious thing. It's its own type of trauma that impacts us. And it makes me think of something that I was talking about with Corey today. And so we have this plant at our studio that I bought right before we opened. And I was like super excited about this plant. Like it's kind of like one of the more expensive plants that I bought. And I was like, it's going to look really nice in the studio. It's going to tie everything together. And so we have this plant. And I'm pretty sure like after the first couple of weeks, like we've just been killing this plant. And we've tried everything. One thing, like I think just like burn the leaves because it got too hot by the window in the middle of the summer here. So anyways, it's this like tragic plant. And I think the last time I was in the studio, I told Corey, I was like, you should probably just get rid of the plant. We'll just get a new plant. But the team is like really committed to this plant. And so the most recent thing they decided was like, you know what, let's just cut these old leaves off and see what happens. And so they cut the leaves off. And Corey told me today that there's all these new shoots that I wouldn't even believe. And so like, you know, that's the nature teaching us life lessons here, is that when you've got all this crap, all this baggage that you try to hang around, like, of course the rest of you is going to die. Yeah. I mean, hopefully not like literally die, but like dying inside sort of a thing. And that, yeah, we have to cut off those dead leaves, and whether it's a job that isn't serving us or a relationship, so that we can have these new parts of us, you know, really come and grow. And in order to do that, I mean, I guess it's a little masochistic thinking about like a plant going in and like, you know, chopping off its own limbs, but, you know, hold that off to the side for a second, but like having the strength to say like, this is not serving me anymore. I'm going to get rid of it. Thank you for what you've done for me to get me here, but it's time to move on.
Yeah. Yeah. There's an analogy. I think my post on Instagram, it's got a mountain on it. And I have a similar analogy of like, you know, when you think of mountains, at the peaks of the biggest mountains in the world, Mount Everest and some, you know, even ones in Colorado, there's no vegetation at the top, right? And when we struggle sometimes to get to the top, it takes a lot of work to get there. And then when we get to the top and we're standing there, there's a lot of clarity and we can see out but the problem is it's brutal up there. It is so brutal. Like the conditions are brutal and there's lack of oxygen, so we can't breathe. But that forces us to go back down into the valleys. And in the valleys, there's trees and there's water and there's life and there's all the resources that we need. So it's actually okay to like come back down into the valley. The valley's not so bad. It gives the opportunity to like regrow and build ourselves back up in order to provide us with the energy and the strength in order to lift us back up and to help us climb those major mountains.
Yeah, I love that. That's beautiful. All right, last thing I want to talk about was you were expressing how excited you are to be able to go and work on things that really light you up. And I know that was a comment from earlier about like, okay, great, I've got my hobby is my job. That doesn't always work out.
Right. Yeah, there's a chance it's not going to work out, right?
And then what are some, so let's say that you are in this place, Jesse's in this in this land right now of like, I got this time, I'm in control, I get to work on things that I care about. How do we keep that balance and that healthy relationship with these things that we are passionate about that do light us up so that we don't burn out on the things that we do love?
Yeah, I think I've definitely found myself working a lot on the business and that can strain relationships, right? That can strain the relationships with your family, with yourself. And so I think that there's like a period of time. And as you were talking about burning out, and I was talking about going to another job and then burning out again, I'm like, man, I was like self-questioning myself. I'm like, am I carrying the same baggage through? Have I not identified my like core problems? I think that you have to be willing to put forth a lot, especially when you're starting a business. Like, you know this, and Corey knows this from like starting your studio. It takes a lot of time and effort to start something. But then like, if you get it to a place where it's working, it will start providing the fruit, right? Just like growing that plant, right? Eventually that plant will provide the fruit. But it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of love and it takes a lot of making that happen. But it's also knowing when to balance the time to say, I'm shutting things off and I'm going to go take that run, or I'm going to go and I'm going to, instead of staying at home, like today we're, taking Lindsay's boys to their dads. Instead of me staying at home and doing more work, I'm like, I'm going to go with her. It's a 2-hour drive. It gives me time with her. I could have stayed home and got more work done. So like, you have to be able to find that balance. You have to know, like, I'm going to work hard on this business, but then there's also, to your point, it may not last forever, right? It may not work out. Like, I think it's like 85% of small businesses fail in within 15 years, 65% in 5 years. I mean, the numbers are pretty drastic. So it's also knowing when to stop, just like with work, it's knowing like, when do you give up? When do you say, I gave it everything that I could, and now I need to decide, am I going to go into the same field? Or maybe this is an opportunity, maybe I'm learning something about myself, and maybe if I do have to go back into the W-2 world, maybe it's an opportunity for me to rethink my future. It's never, Lindsay told me a story, and I can't remember the actual, I think this person was, maybe they were working in IT or something. They were working in like some completely different field. And I think at the age of like 35 or 40, this person went back to become a social, or maybe a clinical psychologist. Went to college, got, had to get a doctorate degree to become a clinical psychologist. And like, that person did it in their like late 30s, early 40s or something like that. So it's like, it's never too late to do what you truly want to do. Like, life, we live to be 80s. It's not like back when the country was founded and people like died at the age of like 40. We get to hopefully live until we're in our 80s and 90s. So I think just knowing how to balance yourself. You've had this courage to change. Now, like, don't beat yourself up if things aren't working out exactly the way you think they are. Have the courage to do it, but also be humble and be aware of that things aren't always going to be great either when you make that change.
Yeah, you hit on, I'll try to pull this back to like 3 points that really stood out to me. One is the balance. And I think people talk a lot about balance, right? Like, oh, I want this balance in my life. You kind of can't have balance if you don't know what all the ingredients are,
Mm,
right? And we just talk about like there's this elusive thing called balance that we'll just figure it out, or it's going to magically appear one day. But what I've found so far um, is that you can't actually find balance until you decide what actually
what
balances you. And
balance?
so I think that that's the first thing, right? It's like,
Yeah.
I know that you're a big exercise guy. You get to get out in the woods, you get to go and run. That's one part of your balance. It sounds like relationships, are another piece. So find out what those balance the things are, and then the next piece that you said that I'll turn this into is like we go through these different seasons of life, and it's not always going to be the same thing. Like what you're doing right now and what feels good right now is not going to be the same thing that feels good maybe in 12 months, 3 years, 5 years, and probably definitely not in 10 years. And if it is great, then like keep going, right? But wherever you're at, go back and recalibrate that balance, right? Like it's that scale needs to be tinkered with. It needs to
Yeah.
be examined. It needs to look at it. And so now you've done that, and like you've got the balance for this season of your life. And then the last thing is that it's not a one time thing,
Mm,
right? Like it's you make that decision. It's not always going to be perfect, and that's okay.
yeah.
And I think having the strength to be able to once again go back, talk to somebody, and be like, hey, yeah, I thought it was going to be this way. It's not. Or check in with yourself, whatever that looks like, so that you don't have to go and suffer or second guess yourself. Like there's people out there that do care about you. And if you don't feel that way, reach out to me, reach out to Jesse. Like we care about you. We will certainly talk to you about this stuff because we've been through it.
I actually, one of the strategies that I use is my best friend and I, we've been doing it now for going on close to 3 years. We took a break there for a while, but we meet every Wednesday at 7 a.m. and we're not just accountability partners, but we talk about like what we're going through. And we spend 30 minutes each. Like he talks to me, I talk to him, and having that person to just say, hey man, I'm really struggling right now with this. And there was a time when you and I worked together, and I was struggling with one of our coworkers, a relationship that I had with that person. And it was having open and honest conversations with him, and he gave me some things to think about. And, like I think having somebody in your life, another dude in your life, since this is the mandate show, another person that, like, this week I pulled up text and I texted you and Cody, and I'm like, I had the two of you at work, and I'm like, man, I feel isolated. When you're a solopreneur, I'm isolated. So again, we talk about like, we had these issues in our job, burnout. Well, like being a solopreneur, you can burn out different, right? You can be lonely. So like, that's why I texted the two of you, because he's off doing his endeavor, you're off doing your endeavor. And then there's me, and I'm like, I needed that more than anything. So it's just being able to not have the courage as a man, I think, to not be afraid to reach out to other men. And like your friend, your macho friend that's, bench pressing 350 at the gym, you might think that like that macho dude, that's his testosterone levels are through the roof. You might be like surprised that he's going through the same thing you are. And that, he might be willing to have that conversation with you and just explore, people. Like I've met so many people along the way. There's a friend of mine, he's a fitness instructor at the gym that I go to. And like, he and I have the best he's so much younger than me. He's like in his early 20s. But we have such great philosophical and open conversations. And like, I know that I could call him and say, hey, I need to have coffee. Let's talk. Just to be open and honest with another guy. So
That's awesome. It's what I've learned over these last couple of months of having these conversations is like men are desperate for these types of connections. And what I challenge everybody to do who might be listening to this is don't settle for the surface answer, right? So if you've got that person that maybe, today it's Sunday, today's Sunday, right? Yeah. Sunday night football is going on right now. Chiefs just won. Whoop. But like this year, I haven't really been following sports that much. So like if I was going to go and talk to somebody and maybe, you know, like, hey, how's it going? Oh, pretty good. Just got done watching some football. Don't just settle for that. Ask the next question. Like, and don't feel like you're being pushy or you're being nosy, because men are desperate for these types of conversations. And all you've got to do is ask something to get at the heart of like, no, but how are you really doing?
Yeah.
Especially if you know them well enough that you can be like, you haven't really been yourself lately. You know, and I say that because I love you and I care about you. And if you feel uncomfortable saying I love you, then, you know, say something else. But also try saying I love you to a guy friend. Then it feels kind of good. And really try to open up those conversations. And I think that that's one thing that we'll probably have a show on at some point in time, is like, how do you kind of broach these more vulnerable conversations with the guy at the gym who you might just, you know, meet in passing, but turns out, you know, is really down to talk about these interesting topics.
Yeah, I got a good friend that he used to live here in Asheville. He now lives in Pittsburgh. His name's Chad Littlefield. He's got a company called me.we. And that's actually their website, me.we, or like the We Company or something. But they focus on, he's got like a set of cards and some other tools that's used for the workplace to have more open and honest conversations. And
cool.
I went to a networking event one time, and we all started out, it's like, instead of going up to somebody and saying, hey, what's your name and what do you do? Like, just go up to somebody and say, hey, how are you doing today? You know, tell me more about like that, right? Like, get to know people and ask people truly, no, how are you really doing? Like, not, I'm good, man. No, like, what are you up to right now? Like, you know, how's work? How's your family? And just really asking people like open questions. It's those powerful questions that I think we don't ask enough of, because we're afraid that they're going to ask us those same questions and we don't necessarily want to tell them. So, but you have to be open to like being vulnerable and open and ask those questions of people, I think.
It's a great call out. And one thing that I thought about myself for a really long time was that like, I'm just a super introvert. I don't really like conversations. Like, I'd rather just kind of be hanging out with my own energy.
Did you say you're an introvert?
Yeah.
That's how you define yourself? I don't believe that, but anyways.
Wait for it. What I realized was that it's the surface level conversations that drain me real fast. Like, I can't sit there and talk to you about, you know, your favorite sports teams and how's this going and that going, and like, then we just, you know, two ships passing in the night. Because like, I want to talk about this. I can sit here and talk about this for hours. I mean, at some point in time, like my voice will get tired, but like it gives me energy because I like to know how people are really doing. I like to create these spaces. And I realized that I just had to ask one more question, or stick with the same question that I asked and asked it a little bit more intentionally to start to open up those conversations. And then, yeah, when those surface, you know, chit chats are kind of going on, I can kind of do my thing and cruise through it, and then go and peel off to the corner with somebody that I know that I can go deep with on it. But to answer your question directly, like I'm a hybrid. I don't do super well in like big social environments, because there's like a term called highly sensitive people. Like, I'm somewhere on that spectrum, and so that energy is like, it's a lot for me to process, and so I'd rather be in small intimate settings, and then in those, like, I'll go for hours.
Yeah, I think I'm very similar. So I have this outward kind of like, I'll talk to anybody, but if I have the choice, I'll be in smaller settings, more intimate settings. So
yeah, I mean, shit, I've got this show that I hope someday there's millions of people that are watching, and like, I don't have problems getting in front of crowds, because at that point in time, like, it's really just, it's me and a big group, not hundreds of people or 20 people or whatever. It's just me and a group.
Yeah.
But like, then when I'm in the middle of it, it feels different. Anyways, this is a topic for a whole nother day.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for being here, man. I really enjoyed it. I look forward to hopefully hosting you for more of these. You're a guy that I've always appreciated being able to go deep on and talk about this stuff.
Yeah, you know, it's easy to do whenever it's over the phone or when you're sitting, you know, at a coffee shop to have conversations, but then like to put yourself out there. You know, I know the numbers aren't huge right now, but maybe one day it will be. But like, you know, telling your personal story, you know, in front of others, I think what you're doing is great. It's a good format. And we've had many conversations about just like men in general, right? Like we struggle with opening ourselves up, because not because we shouldn't, not because we can't. It's just because we've been ingrained mentally since we were a child. And at some point, kids stopped, at a certain age. I'm sure if you're a child psychologist, child person, exactly like when that stops, and it usually stops when you're about 6 or 7 years old. And I think that we need to crack open that nut and allow men to kind of, open back up, because I think it's going to make us better husbands. It's going to make us better fathers. It's going to make us better people to work with, better friends. So I think what you're doing with the mandate is pretty awesome.
Well, I could not agree more. Thank you from my heart for being here with me today.
Cool.
Really enjoyed it. Thanks for sharing all your wisdom, and we'll have you back on here soon.
I look forward to having you on my podcast too.
Yeah, can't wait. I'll see you in a couple days.
Soon. All right, sounds good.
All right, take it easy, man.
All right, bye.
All right, everybody, that about does it for tonight. Hopefully, if you've made it this far, you enjoyed talking about burnout and a little bit more. You know that we'll always go deeper than what we advertise in our evening mandates. Once again, thanks to Jesse for coming and hanging out with us tonight. I really enjoyed it. And the last piece of wisdom, because I think Jesse did a good job of wrapping us up, that I want to call out from today's show is like, it's never too late to make a change. And I know it's easy to feel trapped in whatever your current situation is, whether it's a relationship, a job, financial, what have you. There are people that are changing careers in their 60s. There are people that are reinventing their relationships across the board. It's all possible. You could do it yourself. It's better if you've got a support network. So if you're ever thinking about making change and want somebody to talk to, I'm here. I can always recommend other folks to go and talk to. But if you're feeling that angst, something isn't right, you're checking in with your body and doing some reflection on what it's really been like, and it's not there, and you need some help to find that courage and that strength inside of you to make the change, just reach out. So thanks for hanging out with us tonight. This is another episode of The Mandate. Enjoyed having you. I'm your host, Adam Hoffman, and we will see you here in a couple days.
Thanks for listening to The Mandate with your host, Adam Hoffman. It's time to do your part in raising awareness of men's mental health, shifting the stigma, and having a positive impact on someone's life. Share this episode with a friend who could use some support and post it on your social channels. Have questions or thoughts? Text Adam at 512-980-3935. Find more episodes, upcoming live shows, and life-changing resources at mandateshow.com. Your mandate is to take your mental health seriously. Be courageous, stay vulnerable, live authentically. Until next time, y'all.